What's up, guys? This is Zay. I figured I'd give my thoughts and opinions on Karazhan now with post-nerf raid changes. And I first wanted to drop this clip in here where the Attune the Huntsman mount dropped. Super cool moment. I won it with a 99. It doesn't see or show since I have the cover there, but this session was from December 5th to December 8th, and I had the privilege of raiding a lot of the time with like different groups. This group was like a guildy, mostly guild members, and I was tanking. First couple tries tanking as a bear, which was super fun. Glad we were able to set up characters for that, and also smash these raids with phase one gear. On the contrary, or additionally, uh, you know, thoughts about post nerf and also playing with this amount of gear has definitely had some mixed feelings from some people. In the beginning, there were some Black Temple gear that got dropped. So you would have like Madness, Skull of Gul'dan, and the Illidari Cloak, which was cool. Understandably had to get removed. There's also Dragon Maw being a one-hander instead of the main hand or unique, which allowed for people to dual wield. I don't think this will get pushed into live. If it does, I think a lot of Bislists will definitely change. And I mean, you will see a lot of warriors and like the top overall damage. I don't think it does a whole lot of difference, but just to give you an insight of what that is. So from my conclusion of the raid testing, I feel as if Karazhan isn't it's not really changed that much. I don't know. Obviously, there's nerfs that have been, talked about. And there's I'm not the type of guy to comb through the lines of what's nerfed and what's not nerfed. I feel like more it's better to just talk about the experience since I'm more of like a vibes kind of guy, unless like it's very obvious that the bosses are pushovers, which these bosses really weren't pushovers. They were just like, you still had to do the mechanics, you still had to be very cautious of the trash. Even in this clip right here, you're seeing him being very methodical about like the pulls. There were some groups that I would play with that would pretty much just not give a fuck about like the trash, and they would end up wiping because either the healers just don't know how to heal, or like maybe they're misusing max rank healing spells instead of like more efficient or more mana efficient spells, or the tanks are just being dumbasses and they're just pulling the entire room thinking that it's Wrath or Cataclysm and you can just heal through it and zug it down. It's not that. TBC is a very slow and methodical system when it comes to pulling trash. You can get very efficient and get fast, but it's with the understanding of how the pulls work and what you're doing, right? So that knowledge obviously makes the content a bit challenging still in its regard. I also think that post nerf is okay for Karazhan, just because nobody really wants to sit through like 3 to 4 hour Karazhans for the first couple weeks, especially in an accelerated timeline, assumingly so, where people just kind of want to just smash the raids and then call it a day. I think generally with the TBC hype, there's also a bigger hype for Classic Plus. So there's a different lens and context that we're viewing TBC Classic Anniversary in compared to TBC Classic in 2021, compared to original TBC in 2007. There's just way different lenses that we're viewing it in right now. And I think at this time, these raids should be pretty accessible to the casual player, like the Giga Dupes or the dad gamers, and especially in efficient time as well. I want Blizzard to revisit the thought of having post-nerf raids for all raids. I do think there should be some cool challenges like pre-nerf KT for SSC and TK. I just feel as if this phase is more just like an introductory phase. Like if you're like someone that wants to join a guild, or if you're someone that wants to be in a community, you have these more intimate environments like a 10-man raid. You have heroic dungeons, and then you have the bigger 25-man raids of Gruul and Mag's Lair, which opens you up to a bigger pool of, a guild or a community that you can also get to know, which I feel like is always hard in a vanilla setting. Speaking from experience, it was pretty hard to find a belonging to guild in classic era because you have 40 raiders, you have a big group of people just all gunning for like the same loot, and there's could be a mix of people every day coming into the raid, so it's hard to find people that will be consistent and form friendship over time. Whereas TBC, you have a 10-man raid, you can instantly become friends with people, and I don't think it should be difficult in that sense. This should be the most accessible tier to raid in my opinion, given the fact of these player sizes, and most of your time is just going to be dungeon grinding, grabbing badges for your gear, and then occasionally raids like this. So that's the big social aspect, along with some of the mixed difficulty aspects. The second thing I wanted to talk about is just general player mindset coming into the Burning Crusade. For some people, they would just instantly leave the groups after either wiping to a couple of trash packs, not like entirely, like maybe one or two people die from the trash pack and the pool will recover, or a boss wipe and people would just like instantly leave. And I've had a lot of like complaints, or not complaints, but I've had a lot of people like would say in the raid chat like, "Hey, time is limited. I got somewhere to be," and I don't expect that mindset to change coming into TBC. Obviously, it's different because at the time this PTR session is being held, it's during the holidays, and there's also Throne of Thunder PTR. Maybe if some people care about that, other people also running guilds, so there's many factors to consider. But I think generally one thing that's consistent is just people that are playing this just don't have time, right? It's like old heads. No offense to old people, but like it's like people that have played this before. Maybe they're interested in running it with some friends, or maybe people are just not that interested in the Burning Crusade at all because of post-nerf changes. So they'll be very quick to leave groups like these and make up a new PTR character or whatever, which is, I mean, it's whatever, but I still think it's just a waste of time if you're gonna commit to like a raid and just test out to see what's here. I also hear a lot of sentiment too about like what is there to test in the Burning Crusade, what is there to test in Karazhan. I think a big thing is that since there's always going to be integrated code bases to make working on these projects easier and smoother, I also think there is a problem in there's a problem in just generally when you're bringing back these old re-releases, everything just kind of bricks. Like weak auras and add-ons weren't bricking or bricking a lot, so I had to resort to using like Omen 3. Some people would always ask like, hey, do you guys have working DBM, working add-ons, etc., which I feel kind of annoyed that like the testing experience is pretty shit. But then again, I don't think Blizzard gives a fuck about the Burning Crusade Classic Anniversary. I think this is more like players just wanting to go back into Outland. It's more of a player driven thing than Blizzard themselves. What I also wanted to point out is that drums and lust didn't work as well as they've intended. I want to double back and talk about the first night on the 5th, where it was still like group lust, or yeah, group lust. So you could basically swap shamans out, and I understand that the PTR immediately shut down to fix that and also take out some of the Black Temple gear. Drums has also been a bit confusing too. As you see, the party raid frames, like there's some people that are grayed out. So when I pop drums, I don't know if it's going to my party as often as it is, but it is nice to obviously send it with lust. And as you see with this clip here, we're facing Nightbane, and I think that's also been a huge contention of like difficulty for this raid. Nightbane is supposed to be a very challenging boss, all things considered. I wish there was like a way to have like an NPC flick on and off pre-nerf or post-nerf versions, or if we could have easier templates to put us in what would be considered pre-bis gear, or phase one bis, to easier test these raids. Because I don't know, I mean, personally, Nightbane isn't necessarily too bad. I think it's nice for the nerf state that it's in. I don't want to wipe multiple times on this for my attunement as well. And again, people will obviously wipe on this too. Like, you'll have some healers that are maybe trying out healing for the first time, or trying out different classes, that don't know how to use like mana efficient ranking spells to heal the group, especially during the meteor phase. You'll have some people that forget to stack up, or maybe the tank just gets giga chunked, and so there's not enough heals, given the fact that the healers are like things like that just make it challenging. And it's the reason why in my last video, like I said, people are still going to wipe to stupid shit like that. That doesn't mean that they're dumb or stupid for wiping and stuff like that. Like, despite it being 20-year-old content, people magically wipe this stuff, and that's okay. I think the general consensus is that it should be people working towards a shared goal. And if you just trump all that just because, like, oh, this content's brain dead easy, I think you're gonna lose sight of like what the goal is, like accomplish something as a group or a team, right? Even despite this being like a piss easy boss. Now, personally, judging from just the reviews of these, or judging from like how these bosses work now, I I don't think I'll get bored of running the same Karazhan. I personally think it's always fun having like running it with people that have different personalities, and like you'll always see something new every Karazhan. Especially like those demon like 3 a.m. Karazhan runs. I think those are my favorite parts about the re-release in 2021. Even though it was a big time sink, it was just funny because like you're having those memories, and you're creating like those funny moments. Just like how I won that horseman mount uh, in the first clip of this video. So yeah, nothing much to talk about Nightbane. I think the last boss I'll cover here is Malchezaar. I think the bosses following this are not like, I don't know, they're not really anything. It's mostly just the trash that's like the biggest boss of this raid, and of any TBC raid. And so you have to efficiently figure out how to go about it and clear it out. That's like 90% of the raids in the Burning Crusade. I personally, I mean, it's okay, but I don't know, I don't like the trash being like kind of just dumb hard than the bosses. It just feels weird. I would rather the inverse happen. Like, maybe the bosses are harder. Like, I wouldn't mind if Nightbane was harder if the trash was easier. But you know, that's all I could really test during this time. This is Editor Zay here. I also forgot to talk about Netherspite. I'm not gonna lie, Netherspite might be the boss, and it might be one of the more trickier bosses to understand, because I think, well, while my group does it great, I think people still manage to mess up the uh, portal mechanic, where people need to like swap out of the portals every so often. I think when my first Karazhan, I low-key forgot it and I messed up on it like a dumbass. But this boss I think is more interesting, along with Malchezaar, than Nightbane per se. Just because you're actually doing some type of mechanic that like you kind of have to think about, instead of like I'm not gonna lie, like Nightbane is kind of like bootleg Onyxia, like a more glorified Onyxia. So having stuff like this is kind of cool. I actually found this boss challenging with Biskir. So I think this would be very interesting to play when you're having like your first couple weeks in the raid, for sure. Other than that, there's nothing really much to say. Okay, now back to Malchezaar. Okay, one of the last bosses I wanted to cover today for my thoughts. Um, okay, Deadass. I'm gonna be so honest when I say this. I don't think there's virtually any like difference with Malchezaar. I think it's still going to be a challenging last boss for people, maybe new players as well. This is my first pull in like years, so I also was a little bit surprised by its difficulty. Still, even with best gear, I mean, it's not really much difficulty there is. Like this boss kind of just falls over after a certain point. But I think overall, when it comes to this raid, it's going to be fine. Like, I don't think people are gonna get bored of it. I just think the general player sentiment is just like, eh, everything falls over. So I don't know if I don't know if that's just a matter people just being wild brained, and maybe they people have played a lot of retail and they think that, oh, this shit's hard. But I don't know. You can still get pleasantly surprised by some difficulties for sure. And I think that will happen the case as well for SSE and TK if they do PTR versions of that, and as well as Sunwell. I remember the Sunwell trash being very notorious, especially in the bosses being very notorious. But again, most of Sunwell is trash. Like, it's not like the bosses aren't the issue. Like, yeah, like I said, the bosses aren't the issue for some of these raids. It's just mainly the trash is being so dumb. Anyways, that's my thoughts for the Burning Crusade anniversary Karazhan, I guess. Um, can't wait for the pre-patch. I hope they test Ghoul and Mag's Lair. If they do, I'll give my thoughts on those two. Maybe I can run some if possible. But yeah, if you listen to the end, thanks for listening. Maybe leave a hate comment if you think I'm ass. I don't know. See you.